I'm no good at taking good advice, and I'm self-careless, so don't tell me twice that lately I've been so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless.
Hey everyone, welcome to Self-Helpless. I'm Delanie Fischer, and today I'm chatting with Billie Lee and Dr. Gina Torino about insights from their book. The book is called Why Are You So Sensitive? Navigating Everyday Unintended Microaggressions. And Billie Lee is a comedian, activist, and you may know her from the TV show Vanderpump Rules. She was the first openly transgender cast member on the show, and she is sharing about her personal experience being on the receiving and the giving end of microaggressions. And Dr. Gina Torino is a psychologist and microaggression expert who is offering information about why microaggressions happen and the impact that they have, the very significant impact that they have on people. So, we are talking about unintended microaggressions. We're not talking about people who are purposely trying to harm others. We're talking about the things that are often, disguised as compliments, comments that are based on assumptions about somebody's age or gender or ethnicity. So, this episode today is all about raising awareness around this topic so we can not only spot these and prevent them, but also handle microaggressions with grace, whether we are the giver, receiver, or a bystander. And I just want to say, don't let the word micro fool you here. Microaggressions impact people's well being, livelihood, and safety in a major way. And unfortunately, we have all received these and we have all given them. So, this conversation is very relevant for everyone, whether we realize it or not. So, of course, this chat we're having today is judgment free. We really have to remove our defenses around this topic if we actually want to have respectful dialogue about it and hear and understand each other and create real change. A really important piece of this episode is the part about intention versus impact. While someone might not intend to hurt somebody, it doesn't mean their action didn't hurt somebody. For example, if somebody accidentally rear ends you while driving and now you're upset because you're having some back pain from the collision, it'd be really weird for that person to say, well, you shouldn't be upset and you shouldn't be in pain because I didn't mean to do that, right? Just because you don't mean to do something doesn't mean somebody isn't upset or allowed to be upset. Doesn't mean that they're not in pain. It doesn't mean they don't have to take their car to a freaking mechanic, right? Or let's say perhaps you have a pre-existing medical condition or your car is on its way out for whatever reason, and then someone rear ends you. Now you need back surgery. Now, your car is totaled. Shit's not looking great. Not in a good spot. Are we on the same page here? Dr. Torino describes the impact of microaggressions as death by a thousand cuts. It's that slow, subtle, insidious chipping away at somebody's self-worth over time. Another really great explanation about this is from a past episode with Sonia Renee Taylor, who described it in this way, and this is not verbatim, but she was basically saying, let's say that somebody steps on your toe once a day, right? Whether it's the same person or a different person every day, the first couple times it happens, you might say, oh, ow, ow, that hurt, but no big deal. It's okay. Or I know you didn't see me there or whatever, right? By the 100th time, that 100th person might step on your toe and you just want to say, stop stepping on my freaking toe here, right? So I'm sure we've all heard things like, she's so articulate, or wow, you're brave for wearing that. Perhaps we've witnessed prejudice in the workplace where a woman is being passed on for a promotion because they're being described as too bossy or too emotional, while the men in the office are described as confident and assertive. Maybe you've been told to act like a man growing up. On the surface, maybe these things seem minor, but what happens to somebody who hears these types of things on a regular basis? What message does that send to them, and how does it affect their lives, their work, their health? So, not only do stats show that we've all received these, we've all given them, but over 60% of people experience these in the workplace, yet only 10% of people are willing to admit they've committed them. So that's either a big old gap in awareness, people not realizing that they're dishing these out, or It's the same few people committing them all over the place. Either way, awareness is a huge key here. And unfortunately, about 1 in 5 Americans experience at least one microaggression a day. So I know that this topic can be tough because not only do we reflect on microaggressions we've received that have been hurtful, whether by friends, family, strangers, but we also have to honestly look at what we've said and what we've done. And that can be really hard. So don't worry, we're all in this together, and there are a lot of great practical tips in this episode for everybody. So here is my chat with Billie Lee and Dr. Torino. What is a microaggression, and what is the difference between a microaggression and a macroaggression?
Sure. Well, I would describe microaggressions very simply as subtle slights that are often unintentional that impart prejudice. And microaggressions, they can be delivered verbally, behaviorally, or even environmentally. So someone might not even notice them. That's how subtle they are. And they often occur for people on a daily basis. And I would say a macroaggression is more like systemic, large scale forms of discrimination that come in the policies, laws, that often work against people from marginalized groups. So, some examples of macroaggressions could be like the transgender bathroom policies, DEI rollbacks, the wage gap, things of that nature. Those would be considered macroaggressions. And microaggressions, they're more subtle. So, it wouldn't be like somebody would say, oh, using, for example, the N word. Now, we all know that is a straight aggression.
Right.
Whereas a microaggression would be something like you might say to your friend, oh, can I touch your hair? And your friend is a Black woman. Well, that might be exoticizing that person to say, can I touch your hair? Meaning you're other or you're different. So that would be an example of a microaggression. Another example could be like at a meeting. So as a woman, you're in a meeting with a group of people, and maybe you say something, and what you say doesn't get listened to. But then maybe a cisgender man says the same thing that you just said and gets praised for that. And you're like, wait a minute, I just said that, and I was looked over, but then they were acknowledged. What is that? That would be an example of a gender-based microaggression.
Billie Lee, is there anything that you want to add to
Yeah.
that as well?
Yeah, I think mostly for me, they're disguised as compliments as well. People love to come up to me and compliment me, but they do it in a way and they really do think that they're complimenting me. And a lot of it is, coming from a place of innocence and ignorance. But, it's like, oh, like, how are you prettier than me? And I'm a real woman. Like, I get that a lot. So even though they're trying to compliment me on my appearance, it makes me feel less of a woman. But yeah, I would say a lot of compliments that I received, like with Vanderpump and other things, they're microaggressions disguised as compliments. They're so subtle and they accumulate and they start to build and it just really gets at you. So
Right. What can somebody say instead or not say if they don't even realize that, they're trying to compliment, but it's actually damaging?
I think just complimenting like, "Wow, you look really nice today," versus
Yeah.
like, "I didn't even know you were trans."
Right.
And like, I get that a lot, like, "I had no idea you were trans." And unless I'm, like, having an intimate relationship with you, like, I don't think that that's needed. I think it's just going with it your intention is to let me know that I'm attractive or that I'm pretty, so just say that
Right.
versus, "I had no idea you were trans." And back in the day, I used to be like, "Oh my god," because us trans people, not all, but myself and a lot of us transition to be part of a binary, to be included and to feel and look like a woman. So I used to, back in the day, kind of take that as like a compliment in a way, like a badge of honor.
Mhm.
But there are so many trans people out there who don't have the luxury or the funds to have all the surgeries that I've had. And so we need to just be careful with that, because then it like sets a standard as like, this is something you have to achieve to be trans. And that's not the case.
Thank you for expanding on that. Dr. Torino, you mentioned environmental microaggressions. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, environmental microaggressions, they could just be things like in the environment where you live or where you work, in the media. So if I walk into a university and I see all of the presidents on the wall are white men, well, what kind of message is that sending to me?
Right.
Well, then I might not see myself as a president. Well, I'm not going to talk about that, but that's in the environment. What message is being sent that you don't belong, or I, as a woman, I don't belong here, or some things in the environment, like some recent football teams, for example, they removed their Native American symbols or names. I think they used to be called the Washington Redskins, and now they're right, the Guardians or something like that.
Yes.
So that's something in the environment at that large scale level that, if it's present, if we see these microaggressions occurring in the environment, then what kind of message is that sending to the public and to people? They internalize them and then they become normal. So we want to kind of create environments where it's not the norm.
Okay, gotcha. Why should we collectively care about microaggressions? Why are these damaging? Could you expand on maybe the psychological impact or anything else?
Yeah, definitely. So, really, they can be best described as death by a thousand cuts. So, as Billy was talking, and as we know and understand from the research, these microaggressions occur on a daily basis and they chip away at people psychologically. And they can create threats to one's safety, for example, in the workplace. And what we're really finding out from the literature is that there are psychological impacts that people are experiencing over time. So there's correlations now that we're finding between the experience of microaggressions and depression and anxiety, lower self-esteem, suicidal ideation. People are experiencing problems in educational settings. They're not doing as well in school. They're dropping out. People are finding that they're having some physical complications as well. High blood pressure, for example, is an outcome of repeated microaggressions. And also in the workplace, job attrition, people having higher levels of dissatisfaction in their workplace and actually leaving their jobs. So that's a real, and actually I worked on a case, was an expert witness on a case where a woman was experiencing microaggressions and they're quitting her job. So it really impacted this person's whole career. So the long-term effects, the cumulative long-term effects are really damaging to people in a variety of ways. So that's why they're so important. So it's not just kind of a one-off, oh, you insulted me or you hurt me. Okay. Because I think some people make that argument, well, why does it matter? Well, this is why it matters, because there are serious, serious complications.
Absolutely. It's almost like if somebody hears micro, in front of the word, they're like, "Oh, it's not a big deal." So,
Yeah,
thank you
no,
for
I know.
sharing.
And in fact, we've actually talked about the term. The term was originally coined by Dr. Chester Pierce, an African American psychiatrist from Harvard back in the 70s. And he used the term microaggressions more because of the subtlety and the dailiness, but they're not small because they do accumulate and cause harm over time.
Right.
I would just touch base on microaggressions being so also macro when you're younger. Like when I was a little boy, my parents, especially my dad, would compare me to my brother a lot. And my brother was very masculine, but I was like very feminine, very like weak and dainty as a boy. And they'd be like, you need to get big and buff like your brother. Even assuming that like I liked girls when I was younger, all of those things were small, but they made me feel just really, really sad and depressed, and it caused a lot of childhood depression, anxiety. Then I had OCD. I ended up missing like a couple grades of school because of bullying and stuff like that. But it was just so many microaggressions over and over and over. And like my parents at the time, and I write this in the book, they were just trying to protect me. They were trying to make their little boy strong so that way that I could protect myself, knowing that I was being bullied so bad. But it was just making it worse, and all I felt was that I was different and that I was wrong. And I was constantly reassured that I was wrong. And I didn't realize that I was completely, you know, my authentic self and really fell in love with myself until I got older and got away from that environment and came to LA. And then I went on this whole spiritual journey of like falling in love with myself and then transitioning and then falling in love with my trans experience. But it was a lot of unlearning, and microaggressions can just be so big when you're younger.
Yeah. You mentioned something I really want to touch on, which is this idea of, intention versus impact. Can we talk a little bit about how we can all become more open to the idea that just because we think something, is harmless, it could be doing some damage to somebody else?
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a really good point is this notion of intention versus impact. For example, if one experiences a microaggression, taking a step back because it can feel really hurtful. So in that moment, it's important just to kind of pause, kind of take a breath, really assess your safety. Like, am I in a safe environment? Is it okay for me to say something to this person? And if so, maybe taking them aside and pointing that out. Say, look, maybe you meant to make a joke or you meant to compliment me, but what I really want to point out to you is that it was hurtful to me. You may not have realized that that may not have been your intent, but that was the impact that it had on me. And I want to share that with you and really use kind of I statements or I felt this way. It can kind of, diminish that potential defensiveness on
Right.
the perpetrator's part, because that happens a lot of times. People will get defensive. Well, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. Well, I understand that. I understand that's not what you meant, but this is how it felt. This is how it impacted me.
Right.
Making that distinction and helping someone understand that is really important with respect to talking with someone about it. If you choose to, if it's safe to do so, you may be in an environment where it's not. And so you want to kind of make that judgment call for yourself before opening up because you're already feeling hurt. So it may be difficult to do in that moment.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the environment and making sure
Yeah.
that you're safe always if you're going to confront someone. Um, Again, a lot of these microaggressions can come from a place of they're unintentional. And so I do try to correct them or educate them with grace. Like I always try to remind myself to be graceful. But if someone is being just outright awful, then I try to distance myself from them. Especially in the workplace, it can be really challenging to confront someone. Like to confront like a boss, which is one reason why I think this book is so important. Like, I just wish it was like on everyone's coffee table because a lot of people have read this book and they're like, I had no idea I was doing that. And, we want to have a really good work environment also with our relationships. And we don't want to feel threatened or our job could be taken away if we do confront them about it, which is why education is just so important.
Absolutely. Can we get into some of the common everyday microaggressions that you've both found people are using the most? Any common ones that we need to be aware of and what we can do differently?
Yeah, I think some of the more common type forms of microaggressions occur when you're making assumptions about someone's ability or their intelligence. So saying to somebody, "Oh, you're so articulate," or again, the exoticizing somebody, and with respect to assuming someone's sexual identity, assumption of heteronormativity, so assuming people are straight. So being more inclusive with our language, instead of asking someone, cisgender male, "Oh, do you have a wife?" Say, "Well, oh, are you married or do you have a spouse?" Like using those words that imply inclusivity and
Mhm.
also denial of diversity or denial of difference. Well, I think going back there is not going to be very good because we are different and we want to celebrate those differences and not deny them.
Yeah. I also really appreciate in the book that you share being on the receiving and the giving end of microaggressions because none of us are perfect. We all mess up.
Yeah. I think one that like stuck out with me because I she's in the book a couple times, is a friend of mine, and she talks about being like a plus size model and how like a lot of people will, if she wears something that shows her skin or any type of just a little bit of provocative outfit, people are like, "You're so brave." And, people even say that with someone who's trans and like I've had trans sisters who are visibly trans. They still embrace some of their masculine energy as they have every right to. And people would point that out and be like, that's so brave. But also the just joking, like a lot of, microaggressions, but also just nasty behavior can be like automatically covered up by I'm just joking. And I remember I used to do that as well. And I talk about this in the book when I dated someone younger. Of course, we had so many cool things about our relationship. We were both in acting class. It was like really fun. But there were so many times where his immaturity would get on my nerves and I would like point it out or like be upset about it. But then I would realize, oh my God, he's like upset. And then I'd be like, I was just joking. So like even though I've experienced that, I've definitely been a perpetrator to those. But also just things on my appearance, and especially the one that is, complimenting me and saying that I look like a real woman. And that's just telling me that I'm not actually a woman. Those are the top three that I really feel like I experience the most. My question is, do you ever experience any?
Yeah, anytime you're a woman in a space dominated by men, it can feel, at least for me, it can often feel like a lose-lose situation. For example, Billie Lee, I know that you do stand-up now. I did stand-up for about 7 years, and just, being in a green room with all men can be very illuminating, to say the least. And I'm not saying it was like this with all men, but I was told things like, "Wow, I loved hanging out with you tonight. You really know your place." Or I was told that, "You're so agreeable," or, "Hey, you're one of the cool ones," or, "You can really hang with the guys," right? And in those moments, at least for me, I often felt torn. Do I respond with something like, "Yeah, I don't really have the luxury to not be agreeable if I want to keep getting booked and not be seen as difficult because I called you out on your sexism," or, do you not say anything and just keep working and have that, inner knowing that, as your career progresses, you will bring women with you on the road, or when you're in a leadership position, you will have the ability to maybe change certain policies or guidelines, or, do you change the game by playing it, or do you change it by calling things out along the way? Is it a mix of both? You may feel like you're betraying yourself by staying silent or betraying somebody else. Or maybe you feel like, you're speaking up, but you're screwing yourself over because you know that by saying what's on your mind, there's certain opportunities that are going to be withheld from you. And were those the opportunities that you could have leveraged to make a difference in some way? You become hyper aware of the comments around you. For example, if a man goes on stage and he's working on new material, let's say, and maybe the crowd doesn't respond, as well as they would if it was a material. All the comedians, when, that guy gets off stage, he's working on new material. It's normal. But if a woman goes on stage, let's say that the woman is the same level of experience or this, same level of talent as the man who had gone on stage, and she's working on new material. If the crowd doesn't respond as well as they would with, the A material, those same comedians, when she gets off stage, they say the crowd responded that way because she sucks, right? She's just not funny. You become aware of that double standard very quickly. And I know so many people can resonate with this across industries. But for myself, I really felt like there was little or no room for error. And that impacted everything for me. It impacted the way that I wrote jokes, how I performed, how many risks I did or didn't take on stage when it came to working on new things. So yeah, that's just a couple examples of the many that came to mind.
The subtle nature of the microaggression is so key because sometimes they can go unnoticed. How do I attribute that? What's their motivation? I don't know. And that's also kind of sometimes the cognitive kind of gymnastics that we do in our mind. Like, if I go somewhere and I notice too, as I get older, and as a middle-aged woman, sometimes I notice people start to ignore me a little bit more. And I'm like, am I becoming invisible here? Because as a woman, right, you're supposed to be pretty and attractive. And so when you become older and you become, quote, less attractive, which I don't necessarily think so, but society standards say so, how do I respond? Did that person just ignore me or not? Like, I don't know if they didn't ignore me, they just didn't see me, or maybe they were distracted. So those kind of cognitive kind of things that people do in their minds when they experience microaggressions can have a potential negative impact too. I guess it's in the work chapter, and there was a person who she had experienced a microaggression. She was a nurse in who was working as a nurse and was mistaken as housekeeping or not being a nurse, and then not wanting to work with her because she was a person of color. Like, that's where really the rubber meets the road here with microaggressions and how damaging they can be and really impact a person's life, and make them kind of doubt themselves and feel like they don't belong. And it's just really those types of being mistaken as a service worker, or somehow that you're not educated or that you don't belong and that you're not up to snuff. Like, that's those types of microaggressions can be very damaging to people, their self-esteem and their livelihood. I mean, so this is how come I think these are so important for us to get out and to share with people. It's so subtle. Oh, I'd like to see, I think they said, like, I'd like to see this other nurse or something like that had a white sounding name. Like, that's not okay. And so I think just to raise awareness that this book really does that for people, to kind of highlight, like, okay, maybe you thought you weren't being biased by saying that, but you actually are. That's an important one I wanted to highlight from that chapter.
Yeah. Jessica writes in the book, as a cis woman of color, she is constantly mistaken as like someone who is like the cleaning lady in her building. And she writes about when she was like getting her groceries out of the car, someone approached her about her cleaning service, even though she's not a cleaning lady. I would say it's safe to never assume. Do not ever assume. And I think it's okay to ask questions like, if you need someone that's a referral, be like, hey, do you know anyone in this building, or do you have any recommendations? But you should never assume. When it comes to friends and family, I know one thing that was really big in my household and my family was like my dad was always like telling my mom, "Oh, you're too loud," or like, "Stop being so loud." And like, you never know where someone comes from. My grandparents lost their hearing at a very young age. So in my grandparents' house, and there was 13 kids, they all were just very loud because they had to be. And so that's something that, like, people have to work through. And you just never know what someone's going through or where they came from. So we always have to be really cautious when it comes to making sure that we're not doing or being a perpetrator of microaggressions just because someone is loud.
Billie Lee, you had a really great example in the book, and it was about the workplace, but I feel like it incorporated a few different things that we can maybe touch on, where you moved to LA and you were looking for a job, and you had reached out to people with your resume, and there was a point where somebody said that they wanted to hire you on the spot, and then you show up for the interview and it's a different story, that kind of experience. Could you share a little bit about that?
When I was transitioning and I was looking for a job, I had such a stellar resume because I was working in restaurants since I was like 15, and I was a restaurant manager and a trainer, and I worked for the same company for years. And yeah, when I moved to LA, I just got such a great response on the phone. And then when they saw me in person, they were like, "Oh," like they couldn't fit me in a box. Is she a boy? Is she a girl? Because I was so early on in my transition. And that was really harmful for me. And it was, that's the reason why so many trans women become sex workers. And I'm not saying there's anything negative about being a sex worker, but sometimes it's a very dangerous job. But I was forced to do that because I literally couldn't get a job. It can be challenging when you're judged by your looks. And I really encourage people to not do that. Like, it doesn't matter what color, shape, size, gender you are. Like, if you are capable of doing the job, which my resume says, then that's what it should be based off of.
Yeah. I'm getting a lot of these comments because I don't want to have kids. Meeting somebody for the first time and you're getting into some small talk. Maybe if I'm at a party, somebody will ask my husband, "Oh, how's work going? And how's this and that?" And then they'll look to me, "Oh, when are you having kids?" Is that considered a microaggression, or is there a difference between that and a microaggression? Or
I would say so, because the assumption is that you are, and that if you're a cis woman and you're married, that's the assumption. I mean, I don't have kids either, and that's okay. It's okay not to have kids, and it doesn't make you less of a woman. Most of these microaggressions we're talking about, right? They're based on stereotypes, what we think,
right.
and how society defines people. And what does it mean to be a woman? Can you be a woman and not have a child and be fulfilled? Yes, you can. But if in the media, that's all women are good for. If people hear that and normalize that, that becomes problematic. And then you can be discriminated against or not seen as good as a woman who has children, and that becomes a problem. And so, but it's really surrounding yourself with others who can support you and who can validate you and validate your experience.
Right. And what would your suggestions be on maybe somebody taking a beat? Like they notice they're going to make an assumption about somebody, and before they do,
Mhm.
how can like we catch ourselves and say something different instead? Do you have any kind of advice for people on those things?
To pause and before you say something, and you can be curious, but have it be from a place of openness and genuine curiosity. And look, none of us are perfect. And I think that what this book really highlights as well is that, look, if you do commit a microaggression, be open to feedback. That's a very important key, I think, takeaway from this book. And just be open to learning something new and understand about yourself. I mean, I'm learning. I've been doing this work for 25 years of my life, and I'm still learning, and I'm not perfect, and that's okay. It's okay to say that. It's okay to admit that. Lower your defenses and be open to learning something new. But before you say something, you might want to just take a pause and say, where is this coming from? What is my motivation in asking this question? And then you can kind of go from there.
Absolutely. And even asking like whose opinion is this even my opinion that I'm about to perpetuate or something, or is this something I've
Right.
been told or socialized to believe?
Learning and educating yourself, I think, is so important. There's not a lot of books on microaggressions. A lot of them are like textbooks. So it was really important for us to create this book that's like digestible and like it's also something you can pick up and read like literally 2 pages and get a couple things and put it down and then revisit it. Because I do catch people like sometimes they'll want to say something and then they'll like catch themselves and like that's a great sign that we are learning and growing as a society. I have noticed a shift especially since 2018 Vanderpump days. I've noticed people are a little bit more considerate and cautious when they are trying to have a conversation with me, which is great.
As far as your experience on Vanderpump, what was the best feedback that you got from the public, and what was maybe the most hurtful?
I think one of the most incredible things was like whenever I would be out and about and I got recognized or people would come up to me, a lot of teachers would tell me how I impacted their students,
Oh, wow.
or parents would come up to me and be like, "You really helped me. I have a trans kid." I always have found that like I've gone through all my experiences and I share that experience. If it's on TV, if it's on TikTok, if it's in this book, I try to share my experience so I can make it easier for other people. And it's always nice to hear that that works and that's working whenever people confront me about that. Um, and now that I have moved into comedy, it's really cool to be able to like educate people while I'm making them laugh. And I'm really just making fun of myself, but I have so much control over that. It's not like reality TV where it's an edited version and I literally have no idea what I'm about to watch and you're forced to watch it. And then I would just cry because it was so awful. But
Mm.
like with comedy, I get to write it. And I have so many men now that like come up to me after my shows and they're like, I didn't know a trans woman. I was honestly quite afraid of trans women, but like you really opened my eyes and they had the best time. So like I just love where I'm at and how much that's evolved. But like I literally try to use every platform that I have, if it's writing projects, TV, film, stand up, my books, to bring awareness to the trans experience. Because one reason why trans people get so much hate, we are such a small number in society that most people don't know a trans person. Like most people do not, have never even met a trans person. So it's easy for someone to paint us as the evil person because no one knows them, knows us. So for me, visibility is so important. So I'm constantly sharing that. But at the same time, being very visible and not having resources is also an act of violence. And when I was on Vanderpump, I was thrown into the spotlight, very visible, but I had very little resources given to me, which caused harm.
Mm.
So as much as we love, being visible and also opportunities to be visible, they must come with resources.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the way that you blend education and activism and comedy into everything that you do, and that really resonates with me. That's been my mission and my work as well. So I'm glad you're doing it. Thank you. What have you found are the most effective ways there can actually be respectful dialogue and maybe some kind of resolution based on the interaction from all angles, whether we've done the microaggression, we've received it, or somebody in our presence has received it and we want to say something?
Awareness of our own implicit biases, that's really, really important. And there is implicit.harvard.edu. I think I actually reference it in the book. It's an online tool that people can use to kind of raise, get what's really unconscious to the conscious awareness, and to also validate people, and
Yeah.
also understanding and empathy. As I think maybe having empathy for people who may not be as evolved or as educated is really important to be able to reach them and to help them to kind of come up to a different level. Everyone's at a different place in their learning, and I think it's important for us to understand that, so we can help them grow, and that we can grow ourselves and understand there's people more evolved than we are, and we can learn something from them.
Right.
Like, as we talked a little bit before about when one is a recipient of a microaggression, but if somebody confronts you on a microaggression, I think it's really important to really pause, take a breath, because I think immediately we want to kind of go to get a little defensive, if we were confronted, say, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I meant this. Just, be open to listen to that person, hear them, and apologize for what's happened. Clearly, you've not intended maybe to hurt or offend somebody, but that's what happened. So I think apologies can go a really long way, and a sincere apology. And I say, oh, I'm sorry. Tell me, okay, I understand you. I'm sorry. And then it's up to you, for the person who committed the microaggression, to continue to educate yourself, continuously educate yourself. Listen to podcasts, go on social media, take in some films, go to different websites, support advocacy groups that do this type of work. Like, there are lots of ways that you can plug in and continue to educate yourself. If you are in a workplace that does this type of training, take advantage of it. So it's really incumbent, I believe, upon us to continue to educate ourselves. I hope that I will continue to educate myself until I'm not here any longer, because that's the type of work and commitment that it really takes to do this work. And I think too, if you see somebody who does get microaggressed, it really depends on the context, and how you intervene, or if you intervene, right? So
Okay.
if you can make that decision in that moment, is this at work? Is this a supervisor that's committing a microaggression against a colleague? What do I do here? Do I wait? But what's really important, I think, about that as a bystander is to be an ally. So maybe if you don't go up to the person in that exact moment when the microaggression happened, you can wait a few minutes later or a few hours later and say, look, I want to just talk to you about something that I witnessed, and just say, I thought that it was hurtful. Is that the case? Like, check in with them. Did I hear that right? And then they can tell you. And then again, depending on the type of relationship, if you're in a position maybe of authority, or you can help mediate in some way, you can ask them, is this something that I can help you with? So you don't want to be too much like, oh, let me do this for you, because you want to give that person the space. Maybe they don't want you to. And they say, no, that's okay. Just, if you could just be my friend, that's all I need. Okay, fine. So then you do that. But if there is some type of mediation that you can do, you can again talk to that person, maybe point out the stereotype, help that person understand intention versus impact. So there's a way to kind of resolve it in that way. But I think it's important to be an ally, to check in with them first before taking any action as a bystander.
Makes sense. You don't want to override their agency. That's the whole problem,
Yes.
right? And might make things worse for them. So that's a great tip, checking in with the person and going from there.
Yeah, I'm just going to repeat this. Just use grace. I mean, people resonate with that, especially when it's a learning experience. Be considerate of what other people go through. Like, you never know what they're going through or where they've been and how hard and difficult their life is. Not everyone is an educator. I have trans sisters who are like tired of constantly correcting people and being the educator. Like, they're just trying to buy their groceries. Like, I totally get that. And look, everyone has their bad days. Not everyone can be so graceful. But that's something that I encourage, especially if they're correcting someone or being corrected.
What if we see something as a collective that we want to change, this environmental microaggression? What is the most effective way for people to get organized and actually get something like that changed?
Yeah, I would say if there's any kind of existing organizations that are already doing that work, maybe kind of tap into their work, use your social media networks. If there's not, and you feel like you want to get together with a group of people to create some kind of collective voice and hold leaders accountable. Like, is there, if that's part of the NFL, you need to go to that, route, then you contact the people you need to contact and get groups of people together to be able to sign something or some type of petition or something to get that change enacted. But I would do my research and to kind of see, well, where is this issue now? And now with AI, there's so much information out there in terms of like what's been done and how to do things. Tap into AI. Maybe AI can help you. I think some people are reluctant to use it, but I actually have used it in my work, and it's actually can be really helpful. But you have to know like what to trust and what not to trust, and be critical. Whatever information you get, be critical of it before you just jump ahead. But I think there's a lot of potential for collective getting together collectively and taking some action with a group behind you. That's probably the best way I would do something like that. And also, continue to share the information, I think, through the different venues, whatever voice that you have to be able to be out in the public, whether that's through, books, articles, podcasts, shows, like you're reaching people, and that's going to create a whole kind of energy behind whatever it is that you're trying to do or trying to get changed. And that's what I really dedicated my life and my work to doing, is creating change. And understand too that sometimes change can be, we may want it to go quicker than it goes, but a little bit is better than some little something's better than nothing. Before 2017, microaggressions wasn't even a word that was out there in culture. Well, now it is, right? And now people are writing books, and we can create change, but we may not see the type of change that we want to see exactly in our lifetime, but just know that we're planting the seeds, and those seeds will continue to grow.
This book is, like one big planted seed, and I'm so excited to see it grow. And I love seeing it throughout my friends' houses, and like people have been sending me photos, and it's just such a nice gift to give people, and I'm super grateful for it. And thank you so much for having us on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other plugs that you want to share or final words of wisdom, and then we'll wrap it up.
You can just find me, it's me, Billie Lee, on social media, and then I will have comedy shows coming up listed on my Instagram and social media.
Thank you again so much for having me. And also, don't forget to take care of yourself. Really prioritize self-care through your networks, social support, therapy, any help that you can get, and continue to share what you're sharing. I think this is a fantastic venue, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you both so much. All right, everybody. I hope this was helpful. Nobody is perfect. It's okay to admit when you don't know something or you didn't know something prior. It's okay to apologize. Nobody's a bad person if they don't know everything. It's impossible. I make my fair share of missteps in this area with comments or assumptions, and all I can do is be open to feedback and apologize and move forward. And that's all any of us can do. If we're willing to let new information in, it not only leads to a lot of personal growth, but to a better connection with other people. So, something I do on a regular basis as a writer and podcaster, I do a lot of quick little online searches. If I'm curious about the origin of a phrase, or if something is a microaggression, or maybe even how a certain word was popularized. I'm doing that all the time as somebody who obviously has this podcast, but I write scripts and slogans, and it's just something that I've added and has become habitual at this point. And I just do the best with the information that I know at the time. I know I talk about this a lot too, with quickly searching how something is made before I buy it, or searching what an ingredient is, and doing my best to pick whatever product is in front of me, picking the one that I feel is sourced more responsibly than the other one, stuff like that. So, of course, this is just the start of a conversation like this. There's a lot to unpack here. So, go check out their book for more information. And there's tons of information online. There's podcast episodes, lots of really, really great resources out there. All right, have a good rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon. So glad you tuned into Self-Helpless. If you want to go deeper into this topic, check out the list of related conversations linked in today's episode's description. Feel free to share the podcast with anyone who may appreciate the variety of things we discuss here. And if you don't want to miss notifications about new episodes, you can subscribe to Self-Helpless wherever you enjoy podcasts. You can also head to selfhelplesspodcast.com for some free goodies like the Quotable Buffet, the Watch and Read list, and more. All right, love you big time, and thank you so much.